Hello, Little Falls. It's just Jeffrey joining you for the latest installment in our Historic New Jersey series. And this month, we are bringing you to the Cathedral Basilica of the Sacred Heart, located in Newark, New Jersey. So today we are being joined by Father Armand. I want to thank you so much for taking the time to give us this wonderful tour.
My pleasure.
How long have you been giving this tour?
I have been here, I'm going on 46 years now. I started this when I was 2. The building was started back in 1899, but it was not completed until 1954. Now, don't think somebody showed up for work every day for 55 years. Didn't happen.
Generations of people.
Generations of people, but also, like most buildings of this size, it happened in spits and spurts. In fact, for 30 of those 55 years, nothing was taking place here. As I said, it started in 1899, but then very shortly after construction started, it was noted that the original architect made a rather serious mistake in the plans, and the building, as designed, was probably not going to stand up.
Really?
Yeah. So it took a while to replace the original architect. The second architect didn't want to have to start completely over. So in order to continue building, it required a major redesign of the building. And so what you see today is actually the little version of what was supposed to be here. They had to scale it down. They changed the architectural style into what we have today. The second time, the construction continued basically to 1929, the Depression. We ran out of money. By 29, the walls were up, the ceiling was on, and that's it. This was an empty shell of a building, dirt floors, nothing inside, from 1929 until 1950.
So no use.
They used it a couple of times. It was enclosed, so it was used a couple of times with portable furniture and rented decorations. But pretty much it was just an empty shell of a building. So empty, in fact, that we do have a picture of this somewhere, that one night some of the little boys from the neighborhood actually snuck in here and were playing baseball out there. So this was actually Newark's first indoor stadium as well.
Fantastic.
Finally, in 1950, it was decided, enough, we've got to finish this place. So from 1950 to 1954, everything you see inside was done. We are standing presently in the sanctuary. We're in front of the main altar of the cathedral, and this is where everything takes place. This great big white canopy over the altar, it's got a great big long name. It's called a baldacchino.
Baldacchino.
Baldacchino, it's great for Scrabble, 400 points. You have 400 points on your Scrabble board. It's 39 feet tall. But if you want to get an idea of just how big this building is, if you look up at the very top of that, you see that statue of Jesus with the red robe on up there?
Yes.
That statue is 5'7".
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Now it doesn't look that because of the angle.
Where we are.
Because of where we are, but that is 5'7". The cross that hangs over the altar is a very beautiful piece of art. The entire thing together, body and cross, weighs over 500 pounds. I like to say it's one of the only things in the building that weighs more than I do. What's so important about it is the body, the corpus. If you look carefully at that, you'll notice that that is carved from one solid piece of stone. Normally, if you're going to be an artist doing that, you do it in 3 pieces, the arm, the body, glue it together. It's one solid piece of Portuguese rose onyx.
Now, was that done in Portugal? Was it done here by local craftsmen?
Not sure. The man who designed all of this was an Italian artist. His name was Professor Gonipo Raggi. Raggi was responsible for many of the magnificent churches we have in this diocese. So it was no surprise when he was given the commission to do the inside of the cathedral. He wanted to find because it was for the body of Jesus, he wanted a perfect piece of stone. And unfortunately, Portuguese onyx doesn't come that big, flawless. So he did something rather interesting. He found the largest piece of stone he could with the smallest possible flaw. and according to legend and tradition, carved the stone so that the flaw became the spear mark in the side of the body.
Wow.
If you look carefully at that,
creative.
you see a very dark red line along the side of Jesus' body.
That's phenomenal.
It really is, when you think about how you have to do something like that.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the main altar. A lot of saints on the altar, the 12 apostles, and other saints that have very special devotion to the Blessed Sacrament, which is celebrated at the altar. One of the biggest misconceptions that countless people have when they're visiting something or other cathedral, they hear that word and all they think is, oh, we're going to go see a big fancy church. Wrong. The word cathedral does not mean big fancy church. It has nothing whatsoever to do with the size or the beauty of a building. What makes a church a cathedral is actually this piece of furniture, the cathedra, the bishop's chair. Cathedral actually means church of the chair. And when the bishop is presiding as spiritual leader of the diocese, this is where he presides from. Here in tiny little New Jersey, we are so crowded that over history, we've been divided into 5 different dioceses. There's Newark, which we're in now, Paterson to the northwest of us, Metuchen south of us, Trenton south of them, and then before you fall off into Delaware, Camden. Every one of those dioceses has a bishop, every bishop has a cathedral. So in tiny little New Jersey, 5 dioceses, 5 bishops, 5 cathedrals. Not one of the other ones looks anything at all like this. And in fact, Paterson and Metuchen could probably fit in here at the same time. But because that's where their bishops' chairs are, they are the cathedrals. Doesn't matter how big or how fancy the building is. And in fact, if you were to come here for a liturgy not presided over by the Archbishop, this remains empty. So like on Sunday Mass, when the rector or his assistant is celebrating here, they preside from a completely different chair. This is reserved only for the Archbishop.
Fascinating.
Now, this building, though, also has another extra special title, Basilica. The word basilica, the word cathedral, have nothing whatsoever to do with each other. One is the title of function, cathedral. Basilica is a title of honor. Think of it kind of as the gooey icing on the really nice
Excellent.
cupcake.
Yes.
Okay? It's a title of honor given to a building by the Pope because of the building's historic or historic or artistic importance to the universal church. Another way of thinking about it is, imagine being knighted. You've done something wonderful for King Charles. He wants to repay you. Arise, Sir So-and-so. Well, in the church world, being named a basilica is kind of like being knighted.
It's quite an honor, yes.
It is. And we received the honor on October the 4th, 1995, when Pope, now Saint John Paul II, was here in this building. And of course, he sat in this very cathedra. As universal bishop, he can sit wherever he wants,
Wherever he likes.
but he sits there. Also on that day, we had down there in the first row, President and Mrs. Clinton. That was the first time in history that the Pope and an American president had been present together at a prayer service in the same building at the same time.
1995.
October 4, 1995. And so to mark that historic meeting of Pope and President, and because John Paul was blown away by this building, he gave us this extra special title, Basilica.
Father, we're here in front of this umbrella. This umbrella signifies...
Well, actually, we're in front of this umbrella and this other object, which have the 2 longest names of everything in the building. The umbrellino, the little umbrella, the tintinnabulum, the bell.
I'm not even going to try to repeat that. But
Okay, tintinnabulum. These are the two objects that you get to display if your building has been given this extra special title, Basilica. Kind of like stripes on an army uniform, it's the symbol of the rank of the building. The umbrella and the bell tell people who come in without even looking at a guidebook or anything, this is a basilica. The umbrella and the bell have changed slightly over the centuries, and even from building to building. These were the ones that were designed for here. If you go to the Basilica of the National Shrine in Washington, theirs are shaped slightly differently. The important part is the red and the gold fabric, which are the colors of the Vatican, the coat of arms of the cathedral, the year and month when it was erected as a basilica, and the bell, of course, you see as a small image of the cathedral contained within it. The pulpit, where the sacred scriptures are proclaimed every time we're here, it's raised up as high as it is so that everybody in the back, and this being a Catholic church, they're all in the back, can see and hear what's going on. But there's a very interesting legend, and I'll use the word legend, having to do with these two saints right here. Keep in mind you've got Cardinal, Bishop, whoever, about to go up there on Sunday to preach to the congregation. And the first two people he sees are these guys, St. Cyril of Alexandria, St. Francis de Sales. Well, like most people, you'd say, okay, so what? Until you did your research. St. Francis de Sales is the patron saint of wisdom. And what I say up there, may I be very wise. Cyril of Alexandria is the patron saint of brevity. May I be very short. And if you think we're making this up, where is the only place you can see that clock from? Look under that spotlight.
Oh, from the pulpit.
When you're up there, that clock is right here. May I be very wise, may I be very brief, and you'll see exactly how long you've been talking. Ambulatory chapels are obligatory in a Gothic building. You have to have them. But ours are really very special to us, because one of the great joys of our diocese is that we were, are, and always will be a diocese of immigrants. We're here today because somebody left somewhere else and came to live in this part of New Jersey. And so with one exception, every one of these chapels honors one of these different groups of immigrants that came and made what we call the Church of Newark. Now, I do tell people to remember that this represents the people who were here in 1954 when the building was finished. Certainly since then, demographics have changed, but these represent the people who really were responsible for this building. Presently, we're standing in front of the chapel that was dedicated to the men and women of Ireland, England, Scotland, and Wales. It's the first chapel dedicated to St. Patrick, but the next chapel over would be dedicated to the Italian and Portuguese of the diocese. Then we have a chapel dedicated to anyone who would have spoken German as a first language, Germans, Austrian, Swiss. One dedicated to Central and Eastern Europe, Poles, Slavs, Czechs, and Hungarians. And then a chapel pretty much dedicated to anybody that the other ones aren't dedicated to.
That's it, just the blanket.
Well, it's the windows in that chapel that are so very important. There's a window in there of St. Martin de Porres to honor all people of African ancestry, a window of St. Teresa of Avila to honor all people of Hispanic background, regardless of country of origin, and a window of Blessed Martin Wu, a Chinese martyr, but he was there to honor all people of Asian background. So you got to remember, 1954, the African, the Hispanic, and the Asian population might not have been what it is today, but it was sizable enough to at least get a mention. This is the one chapel that is not dedicated to an immigrant group. It's the largest chapel of all of the ones in the cathedral, and it's located directly behind the main altar. In Gothic architecture, this style of architecture, it is almost obligatory that you put in a large chapel to the Blessed Mother behind the main altar. And so that's where this one comes from. The chapel is very special to those of us of the Catholic faith. This is the tabernacle of the cathedral. The Blessed Sacrament is present here. All of the windows in this chapel are really quite beautiful. Each of them is dedicated to a different title that we give to the Blessed Mother, Our Lady of the Rosary, Our Lady of the Miraculous Medal, the Brown Scapular, so forth and so on. Very special window here, though, immediately to the right of the altar. You'll notice it says on the bottom, Salus Populi Romani, Health of the People of Rome. That is when it was put in. That was the very first copy ever of the oldest known painting of the Blessed Mother. That painting hangs in the Basilica of Santa Maria Maggiore in Rome. And you know, every time the Pope goes on a, every time the Pope goes on a trip, Pope Francis, he goes to that building and prays in front of that icon. And his first stop when he gets back is that building to pray in front of that icon. It was from the 3rd century. And back in the 1950s, that was the very first copy ever permitted of that particular icon. Another very important feature in this chapel are the 3 chandeliers. Unfortunately, they're only partially on right now, but they really are quite spectacular. Each one is made from Czechoslovakian crystal, and while I haven't counted them recently, the tradition is that each chandelier is made up of over 3,000 pieces of crystal.
Wow.
So if you like to dust them on Saturday, we can arrange that. The stained glass windows here are considered the crown jewel of the building. We have had art people from all over the world in here, and they're rather unanimous that we probably have here the 2nd best stained glass in the world in this building.
The first being?
The Cathedral of Chartres, northern France, built about the year 1000. They're the gold standard by which all stained glass is measured, and supposedly, as far as quality goes, we're second to them. What makes these windows so spectacular is, although they were done in the 20th century by the Zettler Company of Munich, Germany, every one of these windows is a precise 11th century stained glass window. Meaning that although they were done in the 20th century, the technique that they used to make them, the way the figures are portrayed, the colors that are used, the composition of the window itself is precisely the way a window would have looked in a Gothic building built in the early Middle Ages. You could take one of our windows out of here, bring it to one of the great French cathedrals, install it there, and you couldn't tell whose was whose. They would not know the difference. There are over 200 stained glass windows, and that's more than what you can see here. We've got them in the bishop's residence, we've got them in the sacristy, we've got stained glass windows in the elevator shafts, we've got stained glass windows in the bathrooms in this place. So they're everywhere. The windows are arranged in an order. The ones over the altar are the mysteries of the Rosary. The ones going down the bottom level of the building are scripture passages from the life of Christ. The ones up at the top, the clerestory level, are the communion of saints. But of all the windows in the building, certainly the most spectacular are the 3 rose windows, the 3 large round windows over the doors. If you look to the other end of the building, the gallery rows, you're looking at the largest window in a Catholic church in the Western Hemisphere. From side to side, that window is 36 feet across. Now, in front of you and behind us are the transept roses. They're the baby brother and sister. Those are only 27 feet across. One of the things that the great cathedrals of the Middle Ages were, in addition to places of prayer, were tributes and monuments to the people that built them, to the local communities. We continue that a little bit in this building with the erection of this particular doorway. It is very much the history of the Catholic Church in the entire state of New Jersey. And we begin reading the doorway over here with this figure. That's Pope Pius IX. He was Pope about middle of the 1860s. Prior to his reign, if you were a Catholic in New Jersey, if you lived in the northern part of the state, you belonged to the Archdiocese of New York. If you lived in the southern part of the state, you belonged to Philadelphia. By the time of Pius IX, enough Catholic immigration had taken place in New Jersey that New York and Philadelphia could no longer take care of us, plus themselves. And so he broke New Jersey away from New York and Philadelphia and set it up as its own diocese. And it put a bishop in the largest city, Newark. So at our founding, the Diocese of Newark was responsible for the entire state of New Jersey.
Wow.
As I said earlier, we've since been divided 5 more times. On this side, we have Pope Pius XII. Pius XII was the man who was Pope when this building was finished. Above Pius XII, sitting down, you have a model of Archbishop Walsh. Now, remember I said earlier that this building remained unfinished from 1929 to 1950.
Yes.
Archbishop Walsh was the man who decided to finish the building. And so it was very much his baby, which is why he has a model of the cathedral and the blueprints carved on his lap.
Oh, wow.
Unfortunately, Walsh died a few months before the completion of the building. So it was left to his successor, this gentleman over here, seated above Pius IX, Archbishop Boland, to actually preside at the dedication of the building. All of the other statues on this doorway are the previous bishops or archbishops of Newark. The gentleman in the center of the tympanum is Bishop Bailey, the founding bishop of, at the time, the Diocese of Newark for the entire state. Other bishops and his successors are on either side of him there. So as I said, this is very much the history of the Catholic Church in the state of New Jersey. This is the baptistry of the building where the sacrament of baptism takes place. Very often I will have school groups in here, and they all look at this and go, "Ooh, it's the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets." I tell them it's not. But this is the baptism font, and the windows in here are each the different New Testament mentionings of the sacrament of baptism. But as beautiful as all this is, it pales in comparison to the ceiling, which is the hidden crown jewel of the building. It's entirely mosaiced. So imagine somebody on their back putting that together with little pieces of colored stone and tile for however long it took to do that.
So we are now in the Our Lady of Lourdes Chapel, and we are surrounded by images and things that were touched by or had significance to Pope John Paul II.
Yes. When the Holy Father was here, again, October the 4th, 1995, by that point in time, his health was very obviously failing. And the Pope had the tradition that whenever he visited a church, he wanted to spend time in prayer in front of the Blessed Sacrament. Well, as you've seen, here it's in the Lady Chapel. And there was serious concern about making the Pope walk that far. So what they did on the day of the visit was to transfer the Eucharist to the altar here in this particular chapel, so that the Pope only had to come this far. And so John Paul prayed in front of the Blessed Sacrament here in this chapel for quite a while before the prayer service in the cathedral. This particular kneeler was done by a local artisan specifically for the papal visit. John Paul was the very first person to kneel on this particular kneeler. It looks like it's been here since the beginning, but it was made specifically for that particular visit. This large chair here in the corner was the chair that he used the following night for the papal mass in the old giant stadium. I think we had like 88,000 people there. So this was the presider's chair for that particular liturgy. In this chapel, we also have something very, very special, and it's in the reliquary behind you. A couple of years ago, the Holy Father's private secretary, Cardinal Jevish, presented to the cathedral this first-class relic of St. John Paul. It is a small piece of the cassock he was wearing the day of the assassination attempt in St. Peter's Square. And if you look very carefully at the little piece of fabric that's in there, you can see that it is heavily stained with blood. So that is a piece of the garment that the Holy Father was wearing that terrible day, stained with the Holy Father's blood. It's one of the most precious things we have in the entire building.
And he forgave his shooter.
He forgave his shooter. Yes, he did. People will always ask me, especially at the end of a tour, Father, you've been here for so long, you've done this so often, what's your favorite part of this building? And the answer without hesitation is the people who sit here. Because without the congregation here, this is a museum of sacred antiquities. It is the people who are here and who are praying and who are worshiping, who are sitting in the beauty of holiness that make this building come alive. And sometimes you don't know what effect the building has on people. One of the most powerful experiences I've had here was many, many years ago. It was at the end of a very long day. I'm sure you've heard of cherry blossom season. Yes. Here in Newark. That's our busy tourist season. And I think I had 4 tours that day. And this was the last one of the day. It was a commercial tour, elderly people, and they just basically wanted to come and look at the building and leave. They were done by that point. I was done by that point. And so I'm doing the tour and not having any idea, was this working or not? We get to this point here, exactly where we're standing, and I say goodbye to them, and they're milling about, getting ready to go back on their bus. One little old lady comes up to me, and in a very heavily Eastern European accented voice, says to me, Father, I need to tell you something. In my life, I have seen many beautiful things. I have seen many very bad things. And she rolls up her sleeve, and there's the Auschwitz tattoo. Wow. I have seen many very bad things. But Father, let me tell you, in this building, God is.
That's beautiful.
In this building, God is. So that's why we're here. That's why we want people to come and visit. That's why we want people to enjoy the beauty of holiness, to be inspired and touched and have their minds raised to the supreme beauty, which is Almighty God, by enjoying the beauty of this building. Because in this place, God is.
Father, I want to thank you so much for giving us this tour. I want to thank Sean Quinn for helping us to set all of this up. And again, just thank you to the Archdiocese of Newark for providing such a wonderful opportunity to have people come in to tour this wonderful facility. And we hope to see you again.
Anytime.
Thank you so much for joining us for our Historic New Jersey series at the Little Falls Public Library.